If trouble comes in threes, then what'll be the next global market to melt down after the US and Europe? Some are looking nervously at China. China has been nothing short of a financial miracle. In just 30 years, this state-controlled economy became the world's second largest, deftly managed by government policies and decrees. One sector the authorities concentrated on was real estate and construction. But that may have created the largest housing bubble in human history. If you go to China, it's easy to see why there's all the talk of a bubble. We discovered that the most populated nation on earth is building houses, districts, and cities with no one in them.
The story will continue in a moment.
So this is Zhengzhou, and we are on the major highway, or the major road, and it's rush hour, and it's almost empty.
Gilliam Tulloch is a Hong Kong-based financial analyst who was one of the first to draw attention to the housing bubble in China. He's showing us around the new eastern district of Zhengzhou in one of the most populated provinces in China. Not that you'd know it. We found what they call a ghost city of new towers with no residents, desolate condos, and vacant subdivisions, uninhabited for miles and miles and miles and miles of empty apartments.
Why are they empty? I've heard that they have actually been sold.
They've all been sold. They've all been
All
sold.
been sold.
Absolutely.
They're owned.
Owned by people in China's emerging middle class who now have enough money to invest, but few ways to do it. They're not allowed to invest abroad. Banks offer paltry returns, and the stock market is a roller coaster. But 15 years ago, the government changed its policy and allowed people to buy their own homes, and the floodgates opened.
So what they do is they invest in property because property prices have always gone up by more than inflation.
And they believe it'll always go up.
Yeah, just like they believed in the US.
Actually, property values have doubled, tripled, and more. So people in the middle class have sunk every last penny into buying 5, even 10 apartments, fueling a building bonanza unprecedented in human history. No nation has ever built so much, so fast.
How important is real estate to the Chinese economy? Is it central?
Yes, it's the main driver of growth and has been for the last few years. Some estimates have it as high as 20 or 30% of the whole economy.
But they're not just building housing. They're building cities.
Yes, that's right.
Giant cities being built with people not coming to live here.
Yes, I think they're building somewhere between 12 and 24 new cities every single year.
Unlike our market-driven economy, in China, it's the government that has spent some $2 trillion to get these cities built as a way of keeping the economy growing. The assumption is if you build it, they'll come. But no one's coming.
This is really completely, totally empty, and it goes up.
Gilliam took us to this shopping mall that's been standing vacant for 3 years.
Can I find this all over China?
Yes, you can. They've simply built too much infrastructure too quickly.
But I see KFC behind you.
Yep.
I see Starbucks over there. I see some other very recognizable American franchises coming in here.
Yep.
At least does that mean they have faith that this is going to ignite?
No, these are all fake signs. This is to give potential buyers the impression of what it might look like if they moved in.
They're not real. So KFC didn't buy this space or rent this space?
No, they haven't.
Starbucks?
No.
They just put the sign up?
That's right.
It's all make-believe, non-existent supply for non-existent demand.
Look at that. Swarovski, Piaget. They're hoping for high-end, too.
H&M, Zara.
And it's all Potemkin.
Yeah.
It's surreal, and it's everywhere, like the city of Ordos in Mongolia, built for 1 million people who didn't show up. And no, you're not in England. You're in Thamestown, a development near Shanghai built like an English village.
And it was finished, I think, around 5 or 6 years ago. And it must have cost close to $1 billion US. And you'll see it's still standing there empty.
Well, I've heard that there is some industry there, or some business, one business there.
Marriage.
Wedding pictures, is that right?
And what's more uplifting than a wedding? Or 10? You can see these empty developments on the edge of almost every city in China.
What about the idea that China is urbanizing? People are flooding into cities, or want to anyway, from the rural areas, by the hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
And that this really is a smart move, build a housing to accommodate the urbanization process.
Well, so people are being moved into the cities, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can afford these apartments, which, cost $100,000 or whatever. I mean, these are poor people moving into the cities, so they're building the wrong sort of apartments.
And what's worse, to build all these massive cities, they've had to tear down what was there before, clearing rice fields and displacing, by some counts, tens of millions of villagers. On the edge of Zhangzhou, Gilliam and I came upon a strange sight.
I'm just watching what they're doing. Do you have any idea?
I think they're trying to recycle the bricks.
These villagers are salvaging what's left of their homes, bulldozed to make room for more empty condos, already encroaching in the distance.
There are all these empty apartments over here. Can they conceivably move into those upscale places?
Most people in China live on about or less than $2 a day, and these apartments probably cost upwards of $50,000 or $60,000, so it's very unlikely.
What will happen to them, do you think?
They'll be forced to relocate somewhere. I have no idea where they'll go.
These are the immediate casualties of the building boom. And there's another problem. Analysts warn that all this building has created a bubble that could burst.
So if the bubble bursts, who's left holding the bag?
There are multiple classes of people that are going to get wiped out by this. People who have invested 3 generations worth of savings, so grandparents, parents and children, into properties, will see their savings evaporate. And then, of course, there's 50 million construction workers who are working on all these projects around China.
The prognosis of a bubble about to burst isn't only coming from financial gloom and doomers. We heard it from the most unlikely source.
Are you the biggest home builder in the world?
Yes, I think maybe.
You may be.
Yes, only the quantity, not quality.
Wang Shi is modest, but his company, Vanke, is a $53 billion real estate empire building more homes than anyone in China. He was born on the front lines of communism and joined the Red Army, but he secretly read forbidden books about capitalism, so that when China liberalized its economy, he rushed to the front lines of the free market. Even he thinks today's situation is out of control. Are homes in China too expensive today?
Yeah.
Here's a number that I saw. A typical apartment in Shanghai
Uh-huh.
cost about 45 times the average resident's annual salary.
Even higher. Even
What does
higher.
that mean for your economy if it's just too expensive for the vast majority of people to
So
buy?
I think that dangerous.
Dangerous.
That's the bubble. So I think that's the problem.
Is there a bubble?
Yes, of course.
There is a bubble,
Yes.
and the issue is, will it burst or not?
Yes,
That's the big
yes.
issue.
If that bubble, that disaster,
If it burst.
it burst, that disaster.
To try and prevent the disaster, the Chinese government decided to act. Heard of their one-child policy? Since 2011, China has had what amounts to a one-apartment policy, where it's very hard to buy more than one apartment in major cities. Because of this, prices plunged. The bubble was being tamed. And yet, the taming was creating all kinds of unintended consequences.
Are many developers in debt?
So, yes.
And are many stopping development in the middle of projects because they don't have the money to go forward?
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's a huge problem.
A problem because the slowing down of construction led to a downturn in the overall economy. Unfinished projects dot China, and not just apartment buildings.
Now look at this. Can you believe it?
Analyst Ann Stevenson Yang, who has traveled across China, showed us a giant project, all but abandoned, in the port city of Tianjin, with concrete skeletons as far as the eye can see. The plan is to build a new financial district to rival Manhattan, including a Lincoln Center and a World Trade Center, only taller. but it all seems frozen.
There's supposed to be a Rockefeller Center here.
I hope they have a Christmas tree, too. Skating rink.
City officials told us everything stopped because developers want to build all the facades at once to match. But on the ground, we heard a different explanation.
Workers told us that many of these buildings haven't had any work done on them for weeks, months, as if the developers just don't have the money to go on.
It's true, you see that happen first. The migrant workers will go home. That's often the first sign that the debt crisis is starting.
The debt crisis.
Oh, when you stop paying your bills, then everything stops.
It could become a debt crisis because of the huge loans most of the developers took out. If they can't repay them, the whole economy will seize up. The government's great fear is that all this could lead to social unrest, and that's not hypothetical. Last year, when home prices fell, it infuriated all those owners of multiple dwellings who watched the value of their nest eggs plummet.
And there's already been some demonstrations
Yes.
over real estate
Yes.
around the country.
Yeah.
Have you had demonstrations against your showrooms anywhere, your company?
Often.
So often, Wang Shi shudders to think what would happen if the bubble actually burst.
If that bubble broken, that maybe, who knows what will happen? Maybe that, maybe I answer, maybe next Arabic Spring.
Arabic
Maybe,
Spring.
yeah.
You mean people coming out and demonstrating? Mm-hmm. A lot of economists say that it's too big for even this government to control.
Uh-huh. I believe the top leaders have the enough smart to deal with that.
You think you're praying they do. You're going like
I
that.
hope. But that's uncertain.
Meanwhile, people who can afford it are still buying as much real estate as they can. They're even finding ways around the one-apartment restriction in big cities. Can't buy in Beijing? Just cross the city line and the boom is in full swing. Flyers advertising new projects, potential buyers crowding buses to see new construction. And new owners line up to register their new apartments. Like us in our bubble, they just don't believe the good times will ever end.
Go to 60minutesovertime.com to hear what one of the richest women in China has to say about criticizing her government. Sponsored by Viagra.